Welcome to the Bill Levinson Experience, a motivational podcast relating to the insurance brokerage industry and business in general. And now, here's Bill Levinson.
Thank you for joining us today. It's our first podcast. Here we are, January 2019, and I couldn't be any more excited. The Bill Levinson Experience podcast is finally launching, so I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. That's most important. If you're in your car, at your office, wherever you're listening from, I truly, truly appreciate your time, knowing every minute is so valuable, so thank you. Okay, now the reason why the first podcast is so important to me, because this person, Jeffrey Levitetz, is a longtime friend, father figure, mentor, you name it, all of the above. And, you know, I've known him for over 20 years now, and this one person has literally changed my life in so many great ways. I'll just give you the quick 100-foot overview, and then I'm going to introduce Jeff, and then we'll dive into the podcast a little bit. So the way it all began, you know, I'm out there, you know, every Positive Tuesday, and you know, running all these quotes and weekly training webinars. And I'm always saying it's so important to have a good mentor, life coach. You know, it could be a father, brother, sister, whatever the case is. We all need someone, right? We're all going to run into obstacles and walls, and you need someone that can kind of see things from the outside, you know, being not stuck in this four-wall house, if you will. So it's so important, and I was so fortunate, and I literally thank God every day that I ran into this man, and the way it started is right out of high school. I was going to college part-time, and my mom literally forced me to go get a job and do something that I knew and that I enjoyed. So what I always have known and what I grew up with was motorcycles and dirt bikes. So in the classified section of the newspaper, I saw an ad for Boca Honda, and it says hiring salespeople, and you must have experience. And I said to my mom, I don't have prior experience. She said, Bill, you go in there, you tell them whatever you have to tell them, but you get that job. So, long story short, here I am literally driving to Boca Honda with my mom in the car, and I pull up at the front. I go in for my interview. The first thing the general manager asked me is, do I have prior experience? And I said, oh, sure, absolutely. I worked here and did this, and long story short, he said, Bill, you're hired. Can you start tomorrow? I was literally jumping for joy on cloud nine. This was like my first real sales job. So excited, and I knew motorcycles like the back of my hand. So here I am, first day at work, a little nervous. I'm working with a team of salespeople, all double or triple my age at the time. Sold my first little dirt bike. It was about $1,700, but you would have thought it was $17,000 by the way I was acting. I was so excited. Became the top salesperson in the first month. So I really found my niche. I cut my teeth. I figured out what worked for me, and I was literally on cloud nine. Loved going to work every day and found my new passion. Here I am, month 2, and I'm behind the desk on a Saturday afternoon, and here comes this gentleman that walks in, good-looking guy in a nice new shiny car, and came up to me and says, what's your name, introduces himself, and he says, I'm going to buy these 2 motorcycles cash, and not only am I going to buy them, you're going to deliver them, and you're going to show me how to ride. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. We don't normally show our clients how to ride and use a clutch and shift. So I looked at him, and he had a very expensive car, and I said to myself, you know what, I really have nothing to lose here. So I said, fine. I made a nice commission. I was so happy. But not only that, okay, I had to go strap these motorcycles on a trailer, on a pickup truck, and go deliver the bikes to a very, let's say, high-end neighborhood in Boca Raton. Okay, so here I am. in khakis, polo shirt, tucked in, had to look, business casual, delivering these 2 motorcycles, walk into this guy's house, beautiful house. I was blown away. And he comes outside, and he says to me, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Now you're going to show me how to ride a motorcycle. So here I am running up and down the streets of St. Andrews, showing Jeff how to shift and pulling the clutch. And I'm dripping sweat. It's 100 degrees on a summer day. And long story short, he learned how to ride. Okay, we got back to his house. I'll never forget this day. Got back to his house. He called me inside and says, do you want to see the house? I said, I would love to. He takes me upstairs and opens his watch safe and said to me, Bill, I want you to pick out a Rolex watch. And I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yep, pick one out. And I did. And I was so thankful and appreciative, and I'll never forget, I get back in the pickup truck, I'm driving home. First thing I did, I called my mom. I said, Mom, you won't believe this. This guy that walked in the dealership bought 2 motorcycles. I showed him how to ride, and he gave me a free Rolex watch. And she couldn't believe it, okay? And I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but that moment changed my life, okay? And I still have that watch today, by the way, but that moment changed my life. And so here I am, 17, 18 years old, and met this very successful guy that I was blown away. I was literally blown away about. And not only, yes, the life lessons and the watch, but to get to know someone at that caliber, for this kid that grew up on the West Side, I wasn't born around that, and I didn't know. I was never in a house like that in my life. So, I met this guy, and we started going to lunch and hanging out here and there, just as good friends. And we were walking outside of the dealership one day, and this is a couple years later. He put his arm around me, and he said, Bill, what the hell are you doing here? You are way too good for this place. And that was the confidence, and that was the kick in the butt that I needed to talk to my father and say, Dad, you're here selling life insurance, and he had a small operation at the time. And I said, I need to learn about what you're doing. Long story short, last day I worked there. The next day I walked to my dad's office, said, Carrie, I am ready to learn the life insurance industry, and I have never looked back. And it's all because of Jeff Levitetz. And, I know I'm tooting his horn a little bit. He's probably blushing. But it was a great moment, and here we are, 22, 23 years later, and we're best buddies. We hang out almost every weekend, and I'm delighted to have him be our guest speaker on this podcast today. And it's our first podcast ever, so it's even a bigger deal for me. So, I wanted to point that out, and then I wanted to introduce Jeff and just ask him if Jeff, if you could explain, to us a little bit about, the way you grew up, and then how wrestling had a huge impact on you with, discipline and your athletic ability, and how that kind of changed your life, and then, how it all began in Chicago.
Well, thanks.
Start with
first, I want to thank you for the kind words and reliving some old memories that were, a lot of fun back in the day. I do remember riding up and down Melrose Castle Lane on the motorcycle and trying to figure out how to turn one. And you were very good at running up and down the street. I must tell you, you did a very, very good job. Thank God you were young and in shape. But yeah, I mean, really, it's just I guess seeing you and seeing the passion you had and the curiosities you had, kind of they awoke some old history in my life. I was born in Deerfield, Illinois. I grew up in a fairly normal home. I had kind of a rude awakening when my mom passed away at 16, and really ended up kind of becoming very independent at that point. Really no parental guidance from that point on. And, I started wrestling. I was a hockey player growing up, and I thought that's what I was going to do with my life. But I was too small, and so when I graduated 8th grade, I tried out for the Bantam hockey team, and it was the Chicago All-Star team, and I didn't make it for the first time. I was too small. I weighed 82 pounds, and most kids were probably 110, 120, and I couldn't keep up with them. So I went out for the wrestling team, where the lowest weight class was 98 pounds. It got thrown around quite a bit for a year, and kept staying at it. Had a great influence in my life. Steve Combs, my high school coach, who was a 1968 Olympian. So pretty relevant man at the time, in terms of the sport, and a very intense, very disciplined guy who believed in hard work. He believed in work ethic. He believed, quite simply, that if you were competing against somebody of the same caliber and you trained harder than he did that week, that you would win a close match. That was the basis for everything I would do from that point on. I think the other thing is that he found something in me. He took a big job running USA Wrestling. Actually, he left my high school to start USA Wrestling, ironically. And both him and I were inducted in the Illinois Wrestling Hall of Fame on the same night. And I had the pleasure of getting to explain to 300-400 people what this man meant to me. But he was principled. He was disciplined. He believed there were no shortcuts to success. And it was very black and white for me. I just absorbed everything he said, and really kind of made it how I lived my life. It really wasn't important if I was a great wrestler. I was a all-state wrestler, but not something unbelievable. But it taught me what I needed to know, and what I've always referred to it as that extra gear. So when you're really down, or you've got a tough time ahead of you, you anticipate a tough time, or something's going on in your life that's dragging you down a little bit, you need to kick that gear in that nobody else has. Find it, and you got to use it, and that's your secret weapon. That's what I've done, Bill.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So he was kind of like your mentor when you were going through tough times, and you listened to him and believed in this guy, and it's very similar to the way I look at you and the way I listen to you, and I think everybody needs to find that someone. It's so important. What I find interesting, and when if you get the great pleasure of meeting Jeff at one time or another, you'll see he's always looking at you right in your eyes, and firm handshake, and you can tell this guy means business, and that's how I started to, when I met people, I kind of did the same thing, and I would mimic Jeff and his discipline and the way he told me his story, and I think it's important. He said to me, Bill, before smartphones and laptops, he would go to these meetings all over the country, and he would literally fly in a day early, which I thought was nuts. Even if it's a weekend, it didn't matter. He'd fly in a day early, drive to where the appointment was the day or night before, so he could make sure the next day when the meeting took place, he knew exactly where it was, what time he would arrive, and there would be no issues. So, here we are today with our smartphones and GPS, and, we're down to the wire and to the minute, but, I try to live by that, which, by the way, I'm still working on being on time.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I've learned so much, from Jeff and the way that he grew up, quite frankly. You know what, Jeff? I think everybody would love to know, how it all began for you. I know you didn't grow up around money, and things weren't handed to you. You told me a great story with how your friend's father gave you your first loan. I think it was $10,000. I'm not positive, and then how that started, where you are today, kind of thing. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, I will. But I think one thing that you touched on, I'd like to just kind of give you my opinion on, is that you went back to the handshake and looking at someone in the eye and being prepared for a meeting. These are intangibles that people must know are very important. With all the technology that exists today, human contact, getting in front of somebody will never be replaced. And when you introduce yourself to someone and you look them in the eye and you shake their hands, what you're basically doing is saying to them, you are meeting me. You are meeting someone special without saying a word. And by being prepared, when you go to a meeting, being prepared for a meeting means knowing where you're going, getting there on time, being ready, being relaxed. In a lot of ways, it is a performance. It's a real performance. It's the real you. But you owe it to the person you're meeting with, and you certainly owe it to yourself to give yourself the best opportunity to pitch. And the second thing that you mentioned or asked me about, which was how I got started, my best friend from high school's father was in a surplus merchandise business. I wrestled for a few years in college and then had an injury and was looking for something to do. So when I was home I think it was a winter break, he loaded up some stuff in the back of my car, and he said, when you sell it, we'll split the money. It's just garbage. He had, odds and ends. And I sold it, and one thing led to another, and I ended up within the next 2 years having a retail store and an auction business, and really enjoyed the buying and selling, wheeling and dealing. Summer I would be going to flea markets, realized that making, $6-7 an hour, is really being stuck. And if you had the opportunity to buy and sell things, you had, in terms of money, much more potential to do well. And so I went, after college, I came back and worked in a family business briefly, and it was the water business, water manufacturing business. So I had to deal with supermarkets and supermarket owners, and I saw that they had not been buying a lot of general merchandise in those days, and I just started buying and selling stuff to independent supermarkets. Led to what we do today, which is secondary wholesaling, where we ship product all over the country. We buy promotional, buy name brands on a deep discount, put them in a warehouse in Indianapolis, and resell them. That's the gist of it. Really, the items sell themselves. You're selling, the prices. You're selling Folgers coffee below the market. That sells itself. So it's all about selling you, and your ability to deliver and be on time and be dependable. And that's what the customers expected, because everything I did was on the phone. For a very long time, there was very few people outside of the Chicago market that I had met and had done, millions of dollars with. So, there was a great deal of confidence that they had shown me just in my voice, just in me saying I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. Very invaluable lesson.
Yeah, and that's your thing. It's always whatever you say, you got to make sure you follow through and be a man of your word. And, you've instilled that in my head. And sometimes that's not always easy, but you have to always show up and do what you promised. So, that's so important. What Jeff didn't say is he also turned that business into the largest privately held food distribution company in the country. I mean, literally at certain years, and he absolutely crushed it and built an empire, in my opinion. So, awesome stuff. I love to hear that. And then Jeff, you went to Alabama, and then I believe you wrestled there as well, right?
I wrestled for about a year and a half. It was pretty uneventful.
Okay.
I met a lot of great people there. Actually, yesterday just had lunch with my college coach, who was a two-time NCAA champion, still the youngest ever NCAA champion, won it as a freshman. And, these deep personal relationships I have with people from my past, from 20, 30, almost 40 years ago, really mean a lot to me. My high school wrestling coach, my college coach, my junior high school principal, who just passed last year, my first banker at the University of Alabama, who I will see in a few weeks. He's 86 years old. And by the way, Bill, he still rides motorcycles.
Wow. I love it.
And we talk just about every week. He didn't realize that, a benefit for the American Cancer Society would lead to a lifelong relationship that I would have with this gentleman. And he gave me my first $300 loan. And I still have that framed in my office, actually.
I love it. I love the stories. And then Jeff, didn't you have a foundation that created a scholarship fund as well for Alabama? Is that right?
Yes. We on the 28th of February, I'm going back to be a judge. They're going to do a mini Shark Tank event. The program really basically is for kids students in New College, which is a division of arts and sciences at the University of Alabama. And what they allow you to do is independent study learning. So if you have an entrepreneurial bent, then you would be in this program and have a business while you go to school. And we provide seed funding for these startups. So, they have an opportunity to get a head start while they're still in school.
Yeah, that is awesome. You can even see there's some YouTube videos where he's speaking to the group, and really, really good stuff. And you can walk away with some great takes on the way he speaks and what it's about and the scholarship fund, and it's really neat stuff. I know you, Jeff, are a huge. You're involved with philanthropy in such a big way, and you believe in giving back, and you do a lot for the community. And what's your take like with giving back? And yes, it's great to be successful and do all these great things, but it's also so important to be appreciative and show gratitude and give back in any way you can. What's your thoughts with that?
Well, when you can do it when you're still fairly young, I've learned from experience and seeing others that philanthropy is carried on from one generation to another in a wealthy family, or if it's money that's been recently created, if you have the opportunity to start being philanthropic at a fairly young age, then you can see, how you've actually helped people. So, I'm in that position where I can do that, and I really enjoy it. Philanthropy is a business. A lot of people look at it as, well, you're just helping people, but it's a business. You have to put your foot down, and you have to make sure that the organizations you give money to are doing the right things with that money. You have to stay involved and active. You have to see how they react and if they stay connected to you. I love doing it. It's something I don't know that would have been any different. It just would have been smaller donations, but I think it's always going to be a part of me. But helping others, is probably the greatest thing you can do with your money. It really is. It's been something I've enjoyed very much.
Yeah, no, and we see that. I mean, we literally have a Cleveland clinic here, and the orthopedic center is named after Jeff's foundation, which gives me goosebumps. It's the best feeling because he truly believes in helping and giving back. So I love to see that stuff. And Jeff, I know we're running a little behind, so I'll just ask you a few more questions and then we'll wrap up.
Of course.
What? And I think everyone would love to know this. Is there anything, if you look back at the younger Jeff, 20 years ago, like when you were my age, let's say, when I first met you? It's funny, when I met you, you were actually my age today. But if you can go back, any tips, advice you would tell the younger Jeff from 20 years ago?
Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of things that I don't know that I would necessarily do anything different. I think I would have done it identically the same. I think the less you know, the more naive you are. And thank God for that, because that allows you to go out there and just try everything. And, when you're not afraid to do that, then you're young and you have energy, probably you're going to find out that some of your ideas are half-baked. Maybe one or two, or something that you stumble on, or a family business where there's a little benefit of some knowledge of what you're getting into, and you provide some new fire and fuel and energy and passion. That's always helpful. But in my case, it was just going straight out and knocking on doors. And, I remember when I started, there must have been 200 grocery wholesalers in the United States and probably 200 retailers. And they would publish a book that was probably about 2 inches thick on each one. And I remember literally opening the book and go, well, you could start calling people, because that's the only way you're going to know. And that's what I did, meetings and talking and sidebars and all this nonsense is just that nonsense. You have to get at it. If you call 1,000 people, you'll get 100 sales. If you call 100 people, you get 10 sales. That's it. And the other thing that's really important is not only to try to make the sale, but understand your customer. Your customers, like you, have issues in their life going on every day. And just because someone isn't willing to give you their time today doesn't mean they won't tomorrow. And I think that you have to find common interests, or when I say common interests that are aligned to what they're interested in. And I'll give you an example. If you have a customer in Green Bay, Wisconsin, then he's probably a Packers fan. If you're not looking at what the Packers are doing, then you really have very little to talk to the gentleman about on the phone. You need to find something that's a common denominator for both of you. And that's before the sale. I made most of my sales by not calling to make a sale. I would dedicate hours a day to just calling people without asking them to buy anything. Just some anecdotal thing about something I read in a newspaper before everything was online, about a hockey game, or whatever the interest might have been that I found out. You must do that, or you're just like everybody else. And I would liken that to, if there was a brick wall between you and where you wanted to go, and you just kept walking into the wall, it wouldn't take long before you'd stop walking into the wall. So you always have to look for a way around it. And sometimes it's very easy. It's just finding some common ground and making a lot of phone calls. I mean, sales is what I've done. I've sold myself, since I started in the business, my reputation. And, if I screwed something up, I'd be the first one to call them and tell them and make it up to them. And I think people relied on that. And once you made a friend, then anything that could possibly go wrong, the assumption was made it was well intended. And there was a lot less aggravation with that.
Yeah, no, that's huge. It's like building the relationship and whatever it takes. And what Jeff said is so true. And sometimes it takes a little reverse engineering. And, these days with the internet, everything is at your fingertips. So, Jeff is calling on, let's say a grocery supermarket, let's say, his potential customer, or we're calling on, agents, or you're calling on clients. It's these days you can look someone up in seconds, figure out what are some common interests or what are interests in general, and then maybe if it's they're a Miami Dolphins fan, sending over a couple tickets, or talking about on your next conversation, who the new coaches they hired for the new season, whatever it takes. But it's basically common sense. And, Jeff would always share with me that, he was in the office at, 7 a.m. and he would work a bunch of hours, and he would do whatever it took to be successful and build and build and build. And today he's built quite an operation, obviously on the wholesale food side with real estate, as a philanthropist. It goes on and on and on. Literally, it would take hours to go through everything. But I'm very, very proud of him and what he's accomplished, what he's taught me, what he's given to others. So, this is a big deal today. So we're running a little behind. I'm going to ask one last question, and then we'll wrap up. Sure. We'll wrap up the call. And obviously Jeff is not in the insurance business, as we know, but this podcast is going to be directed towards, anyone in the insurance industry, at the carrier level, but just business in general, because it all relates in one way or another. Jeff's calling on his customers, we're calling on our customers. So it's the same direction, and we all want the same outcome. I want to end with this, and I think it's so important, is, every day, even Jeff, and not that, you're not over the hill by any means, but you're a little bit older now, obviously 22 years later, and you still work out every day, you look great, you're still very involved in business and meetings and, giving back, and Cleveland Clinic Man of the Year last year, all very impressive stuff that is amazing. But the question is, what drives you to be, the best Jeff? Even 20 years ago, or fast forward to today, every single day. Why do you feel like you have to still be on the gas, every day, hitting it hard? What drives you to get there?
Well, it's funny. It's a great question, actually, because I didn't expect that question, but it's a great question. And I think the only way that you realize what the answer is to have lived it. And the irony is that if you take a professional athlete that has a career of 10, 12, 15 years, that's an amazing career. I mean, we look at Tom Brady going to the Super Bowl at 41, and I mean, everyone is just amazed, and they should be. And he's had a 20-year career. But in business, you can have a 40-year career. You can have a 50-year career. And the thing about that is that as you do something over and over again over all these years, you get better. You get better. You learn from mistakes. If you're willing to make mistakes, then you will learn. If you're not willing to make mistakes, then you're going to be, all alone and never have a team where you can delegate because you can't listen to anyone but yourself. But if you accept that, you have flaws and you know what you're good at, and you keep working on refining your skills over 20, 30, 40 years, where physically you don't have to be the best, but mentally you're still sharp. You're like, my gosh, I'm 61, but I'm not at the, that's not the end game. I know more now about business than I've ever known because of my, just my experiences. Why throw that all away now just to sit and stare out a window? Now, I don't do a lot of the dirty work anymore. I delegate, but I delegate and manage. I delegate and follow up. Some people feel like, well, you just, you delegate. No, you have a process. You have a way of doing business that you teach people over years. And once you've taught them the way to do it, then you can start delegating because you have confidence to do that. And then you follow up with notes. And you stay on top of everything. I call them touches. So if something is really important, I'd like to get at least a touch a week with my company presidents. Maybe I need a touch a month with the person who heads up our foundation. But, the more critical, the more touches it needs. And once you've delegated to have more than really one touch a week, then maybe you have the wrong person. But really the answer to your question is very simple. Sometimes we think about success in life in monetary terms, in terms of, well, you know what, I'm going to work really hard, make a lot of money, and retire. And it's such a inexperienced view of reality. It's such a warped view of how it's going to work for you, because if you're really lucky enough to find something you have a passion for and you're good at it, you'll never want it. It's a drug that you just can't ever get rid of. And if you're fortunate enough to find good people early that you can train, by the time you're my age, you have people that have been there 20, 25 years that you have confidence in. You can't just turn the reins over to someone you don't know at that point. But if there's been a long segue of doing it and the process has been the same and they understand what you want, then you can transfer, the ownership, so to speak, in terms of how you think and how you view your business to other people very successfully, and still stay on top of it without getting into the minutia of all the details. That's really the icing on the cake. I think there's a lot of misinformation in books on business that people read and then they take it very literally. And the reality is you need to get in front of customers. You need to be connected to your employees. You need to stay on top of things that are extremely important or were extremely important to you when you started your business. And I always lead with this. I said, there's no excuse for not working hard if you want it that bad. I would be at my desk at 6 a.m. every day. And I will wrap up with this, Bill, that I think the greatest thing I've ever taught to anybody is at 5:30, there was two ways I could get on. I could get on the highway just right off my house, or I could drive another extra 5 minutes through the real expensive neighborhood across the street and then pick up the highway from the other side. And at 5:30 in the morning, I would always drive through the fancy neighborhood. And it wasn't that I was doing it at that time in the morning to look at the beautiful homes. It was pitch dark. I was looking to see if there were any lights on. I wanted to see if I was catching the guys that were so successful. And if I didn't see any lights on, they were still sleeping, and I was getting to work an hour, 2 hours ahead of them. And that 2 hours was 10 hours a week. It's 500 hours a year. I was going to catch them. And going right back to what my high school wrestling coach taught me. Equal ability, and you outwork them, you're going to win every time. That's all there is. There's no magic formula. Do that, understand awesome. Your customers, really understand who your customers are. Don't get discouraged by rejection. You're going to get a ton of that. If there was no rejection, you'd have so much competition, you'd probably get out of the business anyways. So you want things to be tough. You don't want it to be easy. And if you go in with that attitude and you don't take things personally, in particular, rejection when someone says, I don't have time today, just doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It might be there's something wrong with the way you presented something today, but, you can always come back and try it another time. That's my advice.
Yeah, it's perfect, and it could be timing. Maybe Tuesday wasn't good, but, Friday at 2 is better for them, and maybe something happened that day. So that's exactly right. That's spot on, Jeff, and it's exactly what I said today in my Positive Tuesday quote. If it really shouldn't matter if you're washing windows downtown or building rockets for NASA. If you give it your all and love what you do, you'll succeed. If you're in the grocery business, if you're selling insurance, whatever it is, you got to love what you do, because it's going to take a lot of hours and a lot of effort, and if you don't love it, you're never going to make it. And I'll say this.
That's very, very. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, to interrupt you, but yeah, it's very true. But one thing that's not looked at or talked about very often is that if you're successful, it's never about you. It's always about your customer. It's always about your employees. You're getting the benefit of owning the place. So you can look at other people do have issues that are not quite as severe in your life as they are to them. You can call on a customer who maybe, his wife got a diagnosis that she has to have surgery in a couple of weeks, and his head is completely not there. Well, don't take it personally. It's not about you. It's about them. And it's about understanding that if, you win 9 out of 10 times, you got an A- in life. And there's not a parent on this planet that wouldn't sign a contract today for their children to get straight A's all the way through middle school, high school, and college. They'd never look at that minus. And the A- is the best grade because a 90 is 10 times better than 100. I take a 90 all day long because that means that you can go through life getting 10% of everything you do wrong and still get an A in life. If you try to get 100 on everything, you'll never make a mistake. You'll never learn from anything. And so you'll hide in the corner and you'll never evolve as a person. So I think it's really important to know that mistakes are an essential ingredient to success. And that if you look at it like you did a grade, hey, 10% of the things you do wrong, 1 out of 10 you do wrong, you still had an A. You don't have to get down. Get back on the horse and keep going.
Yep. No, that's spot on. That's exactly right. And that's how we all learn and evolve. And I'll take the 90 all day long, like Jeff said. And I want to mention Jeff, he's one person that would never do this, for money or to market himself or brand himself or ego. He did this, and I'm honored. Okay, and I'm going to tell you, with him on, or if he wasn't on with us today, I'm honored that he took the time to do this. For me and my brand, and for our agents out there and everybody listening. He's all about giving back, and not so far from being materialistic or about money or driving the fancy car or whatever it is. And that to me means the world, because he can do anything he wants. Okay. And there's no limit with him. So to show me that, means the world to me. So I truly, Jeff, I want to thank you for taking the time. This means more than the world to me. It truly does. And I'll listen to this for many years to come. This has been awesome, Jeff. Once again, I appreciate your time. Do you have any last words before we wrap up here, Jeff?
No, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to see you grow throughout the last 20 some odd years, and I'm really impressed with what you're doing. I'm proud of you, and just keep up the good work, buddy. Keep it up.
Yeah, that means the world coming from you, Jeff, as you know. Okay, so once again, thank you, everyone, from the bottom of my heart. This was our first podcast, hopefully changing the podcast world out there. Hopefully we'll see you next month. So once again, thank you, and talk soon. Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Bill Levinson Experience. Please feel free to share this podcast with anyone you think would be interested. You may also visit levinsonandassociates.com and all of Bill Levinson's social media pages for more information.